the multiple predictions that modern environmental thought leaders have made over and over and over, and how they haven't just been wrong. I needed to invent a term for how wrong they are, which is 180 degrees wrong, because they predicted something would get much worse, and it got much better.
Like the 2000, and by 2000, this was published, I think, in 1982 or 83.
In the 70s.
Was it in the 70s? It was like by 2000, Florida, gone.
Yeah.
Everything's gone by 2000. Like,
well, in England, you know, the kind of the
happened.
leading, you know, the leading public environmental thinker the last 50 plus years, this guy Paul Ehrlich out of Stanford. And you cannot be more wrong than this guy has been. I mean, he had the population bomb in the late 1960s saying we're going to run out of food. We had unprecedented food. Then we're going to run out of all resources, unprecedented resources. We're going to have dire pollution. Pollution gets better across the world. Environmental quality gets higher, more clean water than ever. Catastrophic global cooling, catastrophic global warming. We have fewer climate deaths than ever. So these guys, they always get it wrong. And part of it is what you're pointing to, which is, at minimum, people don't think of adaptation. But I put it as mastery, because it's not just we adapt to changing circumstances and problems that we create, although we do. We take all the problems of nature and master them. So climate was a huge problem, like we talked about 1820. Climate is naturally a catastrophe. Life is naturally an apocalypse by our standards. I was talking with one of my favorite people, Palmer Luckey, the Oculus creator. We had an event for the launch of Fossil Future, and I was doing this event with Peter Thiel, and Palmer and I had a conversation we recorded after, and he and I really agreed on this. Like, if we woke up in Sri Lanka, we would consider it the apocalypse. And I try to think about that all the time. Like, 5 billion people live in the apocalypse by my standards. And they're not going to get into a good world with fossil fuels, and we're not going to stay in a good world without fossil fuels.
yeah, like India, I think it's 70% of households in India. Now there's cities and then there's the hinterland, and a lot of it is concentrated in hinterland, but 70% still use wood and shit. They burn it for energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's better. I mean, you need energy in part because the world is too cold. People don't understand this. Like, most people are too cold. Even in India, you have way more cold-related deaths than heat-related deaths. So nature is not a perfect place. Like, the planet is not perfect. The planet is imperfect. We have to improve it.
Sure.
Fossil fuels make it much better overall. They do have some negatives, but the positives are just so much greater. And that's I think, inarguable once you really start thinking of the world. If you think of all the factors, pro and con, from a pro-human perspective, I think it's obvious fossil fuels are awesome.
For sure. I mean, whether or not they're awesome 50 years from now is another question, right? Like, if we're able to advance and get off of that in some way, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, you always want progress.
Yeah,
right?
but you know, it's like right now we're just like letting plates hit the ground.
Yes, that's a good analogy.
You know what I mean? It's very bizarre. I honestly haven't figured out yet, because it's been going on for several years now, and I can't figure out if it's incompetence or if this is some kind of, weird reset kind of bullshit going on. Usually I just lean incompetence.
I think they don't care about plates.
And plates being human beings in this analogy. Yeah, you're probably right about that. I mean, so think about the mindset of being comfortable and having what you need, and then lecturing other people for doing the stuff that your ancestors had to do on the come up. Like, that's extremely fucked up.
Yeah. What does a guy like you think about the Paris Agreement?
I think it's evil.
And when Trump pulled out of it...
that was one of my favorite things that he did.
I figured it was. Why is that in place, and why are so many people on board with it?
So, the Paris Agreement is a global commitment to rapidly eliminate fossil fuels with this target that we mentioned of prevent it from warming either another half degree, because that gets us to 1.5, or another full degree. And so it's saying we should get rid of fossil fuels in the name of preventing the Earth from warming 1 degree. Now, it should be pretty obvious. There is no way to predict with that degree of precision, what degree of emissions is going to lead to what degree of warming. Emissions do cause warming, but it's not understood that precisely. But this is, as I said, this is disempowering the world. So they're committing to depriving the world of all the energy that we know works. And to your plates analogy, they have no replacement plates. Yeah. So it's one thing to say, I've got these, imagine if the solar and wind movement said this, we've got the amazing technologies, and just leave us free and we'll come up with a better system. That's what most competitors do. Like if you're going to replace the iPhone, you say, I have a better phone. Right. You don't say, we're going to ban all the iPhones, and then I promise to replace it with my renewable phone made of wood. Like nobody would accept that.
Right.
But we say, oh yeah, let's replace all the fossil fuels with forms of energy that have not been proven whatsoever to power a civilization. And that's, as I said before, what Europe has done is just a tiny, tiny fraction of what the Paris Accords calls for. Europe is in violation. We're actually ahead of them, mostly because we use a lot of natural gas. But long term, we're not going to head toward them at all. But Europe is failing to meet their targets, and yet they are precipitating a global energy crisis. This is how insane this is. And these people have not learned yet. They just had the World Economic Forum, that thing in Davos.
Yeah.
And I just was looking at the website, and I thought, well, maybe there's sub-admission of guilt, right? Because they've told the world to get off fossil fuels, and that's caused this crisis, and people are starving, and grids aren't working. But no. They had no admission, and in fact, all the same people flew their private jets out there, and they said all the same things. And so I think it's really important for these people to be implicated in causing the current crisis, and for those of us who have been predicting this and calling for the opposite to be vindicated. And so I'm not at all shy about saying, like, there's footage of me telling the Senate 6 years ago, you're causing an energy crisis. And Barbara Boxer's like, I'm not listening to you, you're a philosopher. Right. I'm like, you need to listen to me because I'm going to help you think more clearly. And she said, I don't need your help, but she did need my help.
Yeah, she needs a lot of help, though, let's face it.
She's
retired
super
now.
Fucking old. Is she?
Yeah,
Barbara Boxer, yeah.
She was my senator at the time, but yeah,
She's got to be, what, 80s? Has to be somewhere.
Yeah, she was pretty good in Curb Your Enthusiasm, but that's about it.
But as far as the Paris Accords go, what I've always said on this show is if you can't get China and India to participate anyways, and they each have more than 1 billion plus people population-wise, what the fuck are we even doing then?
So that's kind of I think the primary thing I said, it's evil in that if you did it, it would ruin billions of lives. But then there's this other layer where it's obviously not going to be implemented by billions of people, namely China and India, nor should they. I mean, good for them for not doing it. But it puts us at an incredible strategic disadvantage because we're unilaterally what I call disempowering. So we're making ourselves less powerful, while China is openly trying to become the world's superpower by 2049, and they're doing it with an 84% coal electricity grid that's making unreliable solar panels and wind turbines that we're using and calling them green, and by the way, involving slave labor and very low environmental standards. So strategically, the main thing is, again, if it were implemented, it would ruin everyone's life. But the second thing is, in practice, it's going to be particularly ruinous to the free world, and particularly to America, because we're much more likely to follow it and ruin ourselves, while other nations don't.